In the Factor follow-up segment tonight, more trouble brewing at the IRS. There are reports today that Washington officials at the beleaguered tax collection agency knew that conservatives were being unfairly targeted back in 2010, a year earlier than previously thought. Joining us now to react from Washington is Mattie Duppler, Director of Budget and Regulatory Policy at Americans for Tax Reform, a conservative group. Mattie, so the IRS mess keeps growing like a scandal chia pet. What's your take on this latest development?
Right, Greg. Well, the more we learn, the less surprised we are, unfortunately. As you mentioned, we're now hearing that IRS officials in Washington knew maybe a year earlier than they'd been willing to let on before. And this, of course, was all sparked by an employee in the Cincinnati office that is at the center of the controversy, sending an email mistakenly to more people than maybe she should have. So, the IRS is not immune to the problem that all of us have, that someone in that office who doesn't know the difference between reply all. But unfortunately, these are the folks who are in charge of administrating the tax code, and that's a little bit worrisome, I think, for taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of human error involved in this is stunning. But I mean, we have done this. We've all sent out an email accidentally to a group. My vacation pictures from 2006, embarrassing. I had to leave town. Have you seen? I'm sure you caught the hearings yesterday with Ferris Fink, who played the great Spock on Star Trek. He was questioned and he was embarrassed. Those were his words. What did you make of his performance there?
Well, again, this gets back to the questions I think all taxpayers are asking, which is what kind of incompetency is going on at the IRS, right? You've got this fall guy up in front of the panel yesterday trying to explain his way out of a report that showed that the agency has wasted millions and millions on conferences, lavish gifts on employees. And he said, I'm not even quite sure that that's the exact number. We're not even sure of how much money we're spending on all of our Star Trek videos and what have you, because we can't even keep track of that. So if they can't keep track of their own budgets, how are we supposed to be sure that they're keeping track of our taxes when we send them to Washington? This story just gets worse and worse as we move along.
The great thing is the fact that they don't have their receipts kind of gives the rest of America an out so that we can say, hey, we don't have our receipts. You show us your receipts, we'll show you mine. But here's the thing about my real issue with the IRS is a lot of this is comical. We can make jokes about Star Trek and laugh at their idiocy, but do these revelations mean anything if nothing is actually done? I mean, if we actually target the IRS the way the IRS targeted Americans.
Right. Well, and, this gets back to our original point about how this kind of was sparked by an employee who just fired off the wrong email. Now, if we can chalk this all up to one person, couple people's mistakes, maybe we can move past it. But I think there's a bigger picture here. I think Americans deserve to know whether or not this is part of a systemic plan by the IRS to target individuals based on how they think. We need to know that this isn't an institutional problem, that it was an isolated incident. And so far, every person who's been dragged in front of a congressional panel has been unable to answer that question. So taxpayers want to know, and America deserves to know, how this happened in the first place and whether or not it can happen again.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, it's not about firing people or low-level people or even high-level people. It's about firing an institution. And if you look at this recent poll, it found that 68% of Americans said that the IRS targeting was political in nature, which seems to me like an opening for a candidate to target the IRS itself in an election to say, hey, look, it's time that we talk about a fair tax and we talk about closing the IRS down. I think maybe that sounded kooky 4 years ago or 8 years ago, but now it seems like a perfect opportunity where it makes sense that you can actually do away with this.
Well, again, you see a lot of Democrats kind of trying to distract this way, trying to say that, well, this all has to do with groups who are saying too much politically and filing under the wrong political status. Well, for one, the IRS went above and beyond just targeting groups. It went after individuals. It was looking at actual individuals and really going after them and trying to audit them. But on the second hand, that's not the point. If you're concerned about the tax code and the way that we treat certain groups or certain individuals in the tax code, then that's a conversation about comprehensive tax reform. Unfortunately, Democrats don't want to have that conversation, and they certainly don't want to have the conversation about the problems in the IRS because, again, it continues to poke holes in the idea that big government is good for the American people and good for a prosperous nation.
Yeah, and lastly, if each person makes themselves a political target of a political machine, the political machine does not have the power to target it. It's virtually impossible. Ms. Duppler, thank you very much.